Good morning, everyone. It is so great to be here with you all this morning, not just here, but to be in this city as it is growing and thriving and developing, not just growing up, but also out, and also looking at how we're filling it in, especially, because development, as we all know, is not just a vessel for volume, but it also holds kind of the spirit and the soul of the city as well. And we are really lucky to have these three spirit catchers, if you will, up here on our panel today to talk about some really exciting projects in this city. Matt Griffin from Pine Street Group, working on the Washington State Convention Center addition. Julia Nagele of HEWITT, designing the Capitol Hill transit-oriented development and Gridiron condos. And Courtney Ryan from Urban Villages, working on RailSpur, a project redeveloping 3 buildings in Pioneer Square. 3 very different, exciting developments. So let's start by talking about how we do fill in the city as you accommodate more people, but you want them to experience this as humans, not sardines, right? So combining the efficiency and the interaction, and Matt, if you can talk about that, how that applies to the Convention Center addition, especially as you're bringing in kind of visitors and convention attendees right in the middle of this vibrant downtown where so many people live and work too.
Sure, I'd be happy to. You know, we're lucky. I mean, I often think of density as our friend. And today in Seattle, you know, while the Convention Center has a strong business and has actually turned away more business than it's been able to book recently, people want to come because Seattle's a great city. I mean, the work that DSA has done on building a healthy, vibrant downtown has really made a difference. And so as people come to the city and want to come in the convention business, it's very important that when they're here, they don't believe they're in some warehouse in the middle of a cornfield. And what that means is in the design of a building like this, you need to celebrate the urban texture. And so it's important from inside that building that you can basically look out and see the market. You can see the landmark buildings in the neighborhood and celebrate the fact that you're in that urban density, in that urban setting, in a cool city, and not basically hide it. It's very important because people really like to come here, drop off their bags, be able to walk to the convention center, and then we need to continue to think about how to design that building in a way that people continue to experience a great city. So it's very different than the way convention centers were built 10 or 20 years ago, where they're a big box and you go inside the box and you do something else. This is about how you bring the people in the convention center into the city and bring the inhabitants of the city into seeing the activity that goes on with the convention center.
Quite an interaction, and Julia, you're working with interactive ideas as well with the Capitol Hill transit-oriented development. You're talking about moving people in and out of that area, but also experiencing the area for itself. Talk about that a little.
Yes, good morning. The TOD is really special in that it does meet the density thresholds of which a lot of Vishon talked about. So we are bringing a lot more people into the neighborhood. But to make it humane, to add the humanity, that human element to it, the heart of the project is a plaza that's built around 4 mixed-use structures. And I personally owe so much to that kind of urban condition. Since it's Valentine's Day, I thought I'd share a little personal experience about these kinds of places. When I was a student in Rome, I was drawing in the Pantheon one day and trying to understand how that space worked as well as the piazza just outside of it. And a woman came up to me and we had a really nice conversation, a chat. 2 weeks later, I was studying in Florence and I was in a piazza, another one of these open spaces designed for people. And I heard my name being called and I turned around and it was the same woman that I had a conversation with in Rome 2 weeks previously. And you know what? We've been together ever since, and we're married in 20 years. And thanks, well, I didn't expect that. And with our son, we're now a family, and we only exist because of this unique urban condition. So for us, with the TOD and the design and development team, we're so excited to be able to contribute that kind of space for the neighborhood.
Take that, eHarmony. Courtney, you're working on the Pioneer Square, the RailSpur development. Can you talk about getting people to interact with kind of the historic character of what is already there and then adding to it, supplementing it?
So in our project, where we differ a little bit from some of our other developments we're talking about today is really that historic neighborhood that you talked about. And we don't get to go up in these neighborhoods. And so a lot of it is reinventing the spaces and the framework that already exists. And so for us, it's about activating the alleyways, which most of you would probably think an alleyway, Pioneer Square, not a place that you want to come. And we're really looking to change that. So for us, it's about creating entries and portals into these alleys, creating something that curates the space. So we're talking about a lot of small spaces, places that it's a sense of discovery as you come in there. We're also taking and putting services in the alley, things that we're looking at a regional bike hub to where we're bringing commuters in on a daily basis that enter from multiple directions into the alleys and provide a way to activate our retail, activate the alleys, and really start to make it a safe place. We talk a lot about verticality in these historic districts, and we're bringing a stair tower outside, putting eyes on the street by putting it in glazing, and really finding a way to bring people and create that activity and the movement in these spaces that weren't traditionally used.
So the more invested a community gets in your development, the more invested a community gets in your development, which can be a double-edged sword. I'm sure it's a great challenge for you, but how do you bring in lots of voices with lots of different interests and bring that into your plan and still kind of control the plan, if you will? Julia?
Yeah, I'd love to. So you're right in that we do have a lot of voices involved in the project. On the development team, we have Gridiron, we have Bentall Kennedy, and we have Capitol Hill Housing. We have the City of Seattle Design Review Board, and then we have two community groups, P-Punk, and then one that's specifically designed for this project, the Capitol Hill Champion Group. And then we have the design team, right? So the design team is HEWITT, who's doing the two Broadway or station sites, and then Burger Partnership is responsible for leading the plaza and the public edges. Capitol Hill Housing and Schemata Workshop are leading the charge on two structures along 10th Avenue East. So there's a lot of people involved. So how do you do a delicate dance to maneuver all that? And from my perspective as part of the member of the design team, it's a two-step dance. So the first step is we found it's much more productive to be less of a designer and more of an editor, where you're able to connect the dots of a lot of different individuals who are contributing to the project. And the way we do that is the second step of the dance, and that's what we call at HEWITT plain English design. We need to speak in a way that is open and accessible to all of these different individuals who have different backgrounds and experience and expertise, so that we can get more contributions, more value, and more opportunity out of the project. So really two-step dance, be an editor, less of a designer, and speak in plain English.
Speak in plain English. Good luck with that, huh? Courtney, can you talk about that, dealing with the community groups, and especially given the historic issues that you're working with, how you made all of that work?
For us, it's really about going in and starting as a partner. So we really look that we are the stewards of this historic district, and it's about breathing life into buildings that have been there for 100 years and finding out how to keep them for another 100. So it's really about, for us, it's about taking a look at the neighborhoods and really bringing things that will make it thrive into the future. And so with that, we take the partnerships. How do we partner with the city and the Pioneer Square Alliance and Pioneer Square Preservation Board, and how do we do it with SDOT and look at tying in with all the things that are happening and looking at it from a very regional standpoint and bringing that in. So for us, it's about being a partner.
And Matt, you were talking about many times in convention centers, they do build them out in the cornfield so that people can all congregate there, go about their business, and then get out. Right. So why put it in the middle of a really busy downtown? What does that do for the project?
Well, I think again, you come back to where I started, that people come to Seattle, partly for the conventioners, partly for the convention center, but it's really about Seattle being a great city. It's the reason people want to come here. And again, very different than so many cities. They can go to their hotel, drop their bags, and walk to the convention center. And so again, it's the ability to experience a great city. And all of you think about where you travel around the world, and I often say, have you ever thought about a great city that wasn't a great city to walk in? And the good news about Seattle is we've made so many good steps to make it a great city to walk in. I mean, we got some blocks that aren't perfect, and we're working on those, et cetera. But in general, it's a great city to walk in. And so people love to come to a city where they can walk, go to their hotels, go to the convention center, go to basically the Pike Place Market, go to Tom Douglas's 5 zillion restaurants that are all great, and basically have those good experiences. So we're lucky to be able to capitalize on those assets.
And when you were designing for the convention center rebuild, you also have to consider a neighborhood, if you will, and you're doing some things with the lighting and so forth to kind of retain the neighborhood of downtown around that center.
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, we're fortunate to work with the Element Architects, who are here in Seattle, and they do convention centers all over the country. And the good news is they're also local. But as they think about, we talk a lot about the design and being in the building and looking out and choosing the materials in the inside of the building, not just so they fit with the building, but how do they fit with what you see outside the building? And we see the Paramount, we see the Camlin, and these are in particular what Monique is talking about, and these are two great landmark buildings in downtown Seattle with great facades. And so we have approached both those buildings about, can we illuminate them? Can we actually bring out the highlights of those great old buildings as a way to basically create a backdrop for what's in the convention center and celebrate what's there, but also to enliven the neighborhood? I mean, again, we don't have that many old, terrific buildings in Seattle, and the ones that we have, if we can celebrate them, I think it builds a lot more interesting city.
Before you can get all these pedestrians around there, you have to get them there in the first place. So we're going to talk about transportation a little bit. All of the projects near transportation hubs. So how important is that to your development? How did it influence your design and development, Courtney, in Pioneer Square in particular?
For us, it's the linchpin that makes this all work. So for us to have so many ways to get into our project really creates it for us as an opportunity for the future. So it's a place where we know, as the transportation model continues to shift in our world and starts to, we've done some pretty big leaps and will continue to do so, having the ability to bring in people in multiple different ways. So whether it's by train or streetcar, walking, through the freeways, buses, all of it, ferries, the whole thing, in having that all together is what we know will bring people and continue to bring a diversity of people into our development. And so for us, it becomes a linchpin of why it all works.
Julia, clearly, it's at the center of your project.
Right. So, transportation is super important. The project doesn't exist without Sand Transit, without the light rail station. And so that's a wonderful opportunity. But it's just one part, the train component. There needs to be a lot of choices, as Courtney has described. And at the Capitol Hill TOD, there are a variety of choices. There's obviously the train, there's the buses. This is a commuter hub for bicyclists as well, who are coming and going to and from work or coming home, that kind of thing. And so it really needs to be a collection of a lot of different things. But also, you do want to, when you think about transportation, there's a power of the train, and I think that's some of what Vishaan was talking about, not only going from point A to point B, but one of my memories of an urban experience, I didn't grow up in a city, but one of them was coming into Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian stop. So the change of the low-lit platform and then going into the brightly lit center of the National Mall is a really powerful thing. And we have two station entries that are part of the collection of the project. And one of them will sort of exit out onto the plaza, which will host a farmer's market, which will have all of these wonderful activities that activate that for people to be. And then the second entry, head house, what we call them, is on the corner, a busy street intersection on Broadway. It's such a vital part of the commercial activity that can bring you out into the street and then in and through the building to the plaza and on to Cal Anderson. So transportation is really good from going from point A to point B, but it also is a really powerful urban experience.
Matt, you were talking about the importance of being pedestrian friendly. I have actually heard the phrase before that people have said, we believe that the city is waging a war on cars. How do you balance trying to welcome people in whatever way they can come in with maintaining a pedestrian friendly environment and encouraging that?
Well, we haven't owned a car for 14 years, so that's kind of a lower form of life. You know, I don't know what the real answer to that one is, but I think in our company, you know, and our team down here, they'll tell you that we wouldn't do a project that wasn't without great mass transit. We wouldn't pick a location that wasn't without great mass transit. And we're big believers that, I mean, clearly people drive, and it's important to drive, and there are lots of things to do, and whether it's kids and families, et cetera, are important. But we clearly have to think about the fact that we aren't going to use cars in the next couple decades like we've used them in the past. And we start from there. I mean, there just isn't room to move them. And so you start by thinking of that, and so therefore you end up by mass transit. You basically think about where you can make all these pedestrian connections. And in this project on the convention center, besides taking care of the program for the convention center, besides the design elements we talked about a minute ago, it's very important to us that we create a hub for the pedestrian that links the downtown retail core, links Denny Triangle, links South Lake Union, and links Capitol Hill. All those are great neighborhoods, and it's not just about building a better city, it's also the right thing for our customers. So if our customers can come into those places and have great pedestrian access to all those things that that diverse community provides, we actually have then another marketing ability to celebrate our great city and get more customers to come to Seattle.
Whenever we talk about living in Seattle, we have to talk about affordability, big challenge that we face. Julia, your development in particular is addressing the affordability issue.
It is, and affordability, a lot of times the conversation is around affordable housing, and we are providing 110 units with Capitol Hill housing of permanent affordable housing. The other market, what we call market rate buildings, or the mixed-use structure, will have 20% of affordable units through the MFTE program. And so we do have that component. But affordability is an equation that goes beyond just housing. It really is about transportation, about all the other subjects of having access to affordable, not only just housing, but where you work, how do you get there, where do you shop, where are the groceries, even affordable health care is all part of the equation. But we're very fortunate to be able to provide permanent on-site affordable housing, especially in this particular zone, what we call the neighborhood commercial zone. It's a little bit different than downtown zones where it doesn't have those same kinds of incentives built into it. If you provide some affordable housing, you can have a little bit more residential area. So we think it's a really positive thing for the neighborhood.
Courtney, for you in Pioneer Square, whenever there's a development in a historic area, you hear the word gentrification a lot. You get the old versus new tension, and poor millennials get blamed for everything. So how do you look at this development and make it affordable and yet new and attractive?
For us, it's about focusing on size. So as we've been looking at our buildings and carving up spaces and curating those spaces, for us, it's about providing spaces under 1,000 square feet. So we talk about affordability, and for us, it's very important to keep the people that have established the neighborhood in the neighborhood. You do that oftentimes by the size of the units you have. And it's also about growing the talent and growing, whether it's a retail or food and beverage, and keeping these spaces small. And when we're talking small, we're talking more on the micro level. So we've got spaces down in the 200 and 300 square foot spaces up into the 5, but really trying to keep these under 1,000 square feet. And it's a way for us to add a greater mix, more interest, but it's also a way to create a community. So we know as we look at retail that it starts to go and it attracts. So as you get more and more shops, more and more people come for that attraction. So for us, it's about creating the quantity of shops and retail places that will be there to keep them affordable, to bring in the up and coming, to do some incubator spaces, and really to look at it as a whole and a community there. So that's how we're working on the affordability piece.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're running out of time here, so we have to make this a bit of a lightning round, if you will. If you could all answer these two questions, I'm going to give you two questions, and with one sentence or just one answer to them. But the biggest challenge in a growing city like this, and then the biggest opportunity created by increased density. So let's start with the challenges first. Matt, if you want to start that off.
Well, all the easy sites have been taken. Go ahead.
You were brief, that was good. The biggest challenge in a growing city.
focus on density without seeing it as being diverse, a diverse equation.
Okay. And how about you?
For us, it's really about planning and curating a mix and making sure that what you're putting there isn't just a further density and further development, but it's actually to create a place.
Okay. Now to the perhaps more cheerful question, which is what is the biggest opportunity presented by the increased density and how you meet it? Matt?
I really think is to take the vibrancy that comes from hundreds of thousands of people in a community and using that energy to basically make your development successful and make your neighborhood successful. Don't waste that energy. Don't waste that energy.
And I would say density is one factor. If it can be diverse, that's the greatest opportunity. We have more opportunity and choices for people to live, people to work, where they're going to recreate. So density has the opportunity to make more choices, more variety in the city.
Okay. Courtney?
For us, really, it's about taking density and curating it down to a human scale. So making sure that you're taking the place and the development that we're creating and building a neighborhood or building up a neighborhood. And for us, that's one of the biggest opportunities that we can do.
Well, thanks for sharing such interesting insight into three really dynamic developments that are really going to influence our city's growth. Matt Griffin, Julia Nagele, and Courtney Ryan, thank you so much.
Thank you.